Hi, everybody, and welcome to my today's talk. We will be talking about Localizing Cyberpunk 2077, about the team, about the tools and the approach we're taking as a company when localizing our games. And my name is MIkołaj Szwed. And before I'll start, I will want to show off a little bit of our work to you. So let's start with a short video. Sorry for the spoilers, but you won't understand most of the dialogue anyway, so.
So that's how it is. Nothing here at all.
What did you expect? Headstone, flag, and flowers?
No, I don't know. A marker. Something. Anything.
Dann mach ich das eben. Jetzt besser?
Ein bisschen. Aber wäre das mein echtes Grab? Was würdest du schreiben? Hier liegt Johnny Silverhand.
私の命の恩人。
D、俺だってそれが現実になってほしいと思ってる。俺はたくさんの間違いを犯してきた。信用してくれた人を裏切ったり利用したりしてな。世間知らずで自分勝手な男だった。でも唯一お前との関係だけは壊さずにここまでやってくることができた。
Johnny, nie musisz mi się spowiadać.
Wiem. Ale chyba chcę. Większość ludzi, których uważałem za przyjaciół, miało problem, żeby wytrzymać ze mną w jednym pomieszczeniu. Ty jesteś ze mną bliżej niż ktokolwiek inny. 24 godziny na dobę. I chyba jeszcze nie zaczęłaś mnie tak na serio nienawidzić.
Peccato non aver parlato così prima. Ci avrebbe semplificato le cose.
Non trovavo il momento giusto. Ricordi quando ti sei svegliata da Victor e non sapevi nulla di me? Vedo la gente morta, ho paura.
E de tu chorando pra Misty sobre como tu não queria morrer?
Eu lembro de tu chorando pra fumar no meio da noite, reclamando de não ter como me matar.
Nunca achei que chegaríamos tão longe.
Lo de que decepcionaste a tus amigos, ¿lo dices por Rogue?
Rogue, Halt, Kerry, Santiago.
No todo está perdido aún. Al menos con Rogue.
已经过去了50年，早就物是人非了。我不想强行介入他的生活。
得了吧，你已经介入了。
Ouais, pas faux. Tu sais, je lui avais promis de l'emmener au ciné il y a très longtemps.
Bonne idée.
Appelle-la pour moi. Demande-lui si elle est libre un soir. Par contre, il faudra encore me passer les commandes.
알았어. 전화할게.
그래. 그만 가자. 역시 딱히 볼 건 없었나?
그래도 오길 잘했지?
물론이지. 고맙다, 부이. 세상의 머리통이 한둘이 아닌데 네 머리통이라 다행이야.
So a short quiz after the talk. Whoever can name all the languages in the right order that they saw here, they'll win, I don't know, a handshake from me maybe. But yeah, welcome once again. Before we start, I would like to introduce myself a little bit. So my name is MIkołaj Szwed, and I'm the localization director at PROJEKT. I've been working as a freelance translator and interpreter before going into game dev, and I joined the company in 2010. So I've been working on all the projects since The Witcher 2. And yeah, I've been doing coordination I've been also responsible for the voiceovers in Polish and German for The Witcher 3, and in Cyberpunk, German was again my little baby. And today I'm managing a 15 people strong internal localization team at CD Projekt Red. So what we'll be talking today about. So we'll be talking a little bit about the scale of the project, so numbers, how big the project was in terms of localization content. I will be talking a little bit about my team, so my internal localization team, how it's set up and why is it like that. Then I'll talk a little bit about the approach we're taking when localizing our games, both in terms of working with other dev teams and also with external vendors. And then we'll go into the technical parts, so I will present to you some of the localization tools we're using in our day-to-day job, but also some supporting systems that we've developed to actually additionally increase the quality of the localization. And yeah, at the end, I'll talk a little bit about the technology and the pipelines underlying the tools. And at the end, I'll share some success stories, shortcomings, and also key takeaways. So let's go. So as you might know, I think most of you, so CD Projekt Red games are an example of narrative-driven AAA RPG games. And what does it mean? There's a lot of stuff to localize, both in terms of dialogues as well as in-game texts. We call them on-screens. And also the company is constantly looking for new and emerging markets. So we're looking for some new opportunities to localize our games into new languages. And also highest quality localization has become kind of like one of the unique selling points of our franchises, which I'm very happy about. In terms of numbers, there will be a short table with numbers from both The Witcher 3 and Cyberpunk 2077. Whoever was at Colin's presentation now, there was some spoilers already. So in Cyberpunk 2077, we had 18 languages. The one additional language I said about new markets, we actually localized the game into Thai. So it was the first time we dealt with this language. And we had to translate around 1,100,000 words in each language, which is around as much as a book which has 3,300 pages, so quite a lot. In terms of voiceovers, we had 11 voiceover versions compared to 7 for The Witcher 3. Actually, we have 9 now because we added 2 more with the next-gen update. And The Witcher had 46,000 lines, Cyberpunk 82,000, more or less, depends on the language. So all in all, we had to deal with around like 900,000 voiceover files across all the languages. And in order to do so, we actually had to create a team that is capable of doing that. And the CD Projekt Red localization team has been founded after the release of The Witcher 1, because the company basically wanted to have closer control over the process, not to leave it in the hands of external publisher, so that the quality is also higher, because localization, as said, is an important part of a narrative-driven game. So that's how the whole story started. But before I will talk about the team itself, I would like to tell you a little bit about the workflow that we have in our company, because it's a little bit different from most of the other dev companies. So this is the question that's being asked a lot, and even though we're constantly repeating that, a lot of people don't remember that, but like we actually write all our games in Polish. So this is the interesting fact. So we have this additional step in the workflow. So we have to first adapt the game into the English, which then serves as a basis for all the other languages. We then, of course, translate from English into all the remaining 16 languages. We have the voiceover recordings and the log QA, but the important thing is that the narrative being the key selling point of our projects, there is a lot of iterations happening on every stage of the project, and last-minute changes and tweaks. So we had to develop tools and pipelines that actually help us, go with this approach. And also, all those processes overlap. So we have to have a lot of flexibility, and we have to do a lot of things at the same time. So let's go now to the team. So the CD Projekt Red localization team actually consists of 3 sub-teams that do different things, have different tasks and different responsibilities, but we consider ourselves one single team. So the first part of the team is the internal English adaptation team. So all the whole English version actually is created by our internal translators / adapters before it's actually localized into other languages. They're also responsible for English voiceovers. We then have the localization project managers, and their job is to actually coordinate the process into all the other languages. But the thing is, they're not only project managers, but they also have the creative and artistic supervision, control over the languages that they working with. And then the third part of the team is the internal localization QA team. So they help us facilitate day-to-day tasks, like both in English adaptation and for LPMs. But their most important job is to actually help to coordinate the localization QA phase with external testing labs when the time comes in the production. Yeah, and now we'll go a little bit into details on how we approach the localization, and as said, both in terms of working within the team and outside with the vendors. So I know that a lot of localization teams in other companies struggle with that, but the thing at CD Projekt Red is that localization is treated as a part of the broadly spoken narrative team. So we closely cooperate with other narrative teams, being the story writers, the quest designers, the open world designers, cinematic designers, and the audio team. And it's on all stages of the production. And we jointly develop tools and pipelines that actually take into account localization needs, so that the content that's created by all those designers can be easily extracted and localized by us. We also help and take part in the language design for world building. So in terms of The Witcher, we had, for example, those regional British accents that were used for different communities across the game. And in Cyberpunk, we co-created this whole concept of this mother tongue characters, so people speaking their ethnic languages. I'll be talking a little bit more about that a little bit later. And yeah, we also have the two-way road approach. So we're involved very early in the process, in the production, so we also can give feedback early. Like, we are one of the very first teams that actually reads the dialogues, works with the dialogues, so we can provide feedback to the story writers and quest designers, for example, to iron out discrepancies or help fixing errors before we go into recordings, because fixing those errors later on takes a lot of time and a lot of money, actually. And yeah, the most important thing is that we have joint responsibility for scene direction. So cinematic designers in our company design the scenes, they direct mocap, and they set up scenes with animations from the library. But we, as localization, take care of directing the voiceovers, which means that our cooperation needs to be close, and we need to be in sync all the time so that the end result is consistent and of highest quality. So, but the big part of working in localization is also working with external localization vendors, because of course we don't have all those language teams within the company. And there are also several points here that maybe distinguish us from other companies. So over the years, what we learned is that we really prefer working with single language vendors, which actually goes against what most companies do. We work with companies that specialize into localizing into one or several specific languages, of course in the country of this language. It's because we really value direct contact with the team members. We usually have contact with the translators or with the head translator or the editor. We work with the directors as well. It's because, as I said, the LPMs have creative input into the localization itself. So they shape the style of the translations, they shape the terminology. We proofread text as well. We cast the VO talents, so it's all on us, I'm sorry. And we also co-direct the voiceovers in all the different languages with on-site directors. And what's super important for us, and we feel that this is something, like we all work for the same team. So if you want your localization vendors to actually produce high quality localization, you need to actually give them high quality material. So metadata and supporting materials are crucial to that. There's so many stories from different companies, even from our vendors, that they get like an exported CSV with, random words and then just go and localize. And the rule is garbage in, garbage out. Language doesn't work that way. And if you want to really to have this high quality localization, you have to really take care and provide the vendors with the context. And the next part is super shocking, and I know it's like high-tech solution. So we actually have a Q&A sheet. It's a simple Google Doc, like Google Sheet, where all the vendors have access to, and they actually can ask us questions. And of course, it's kind of cumbersome because there are, a lot of questions and we need to answer them, but you should also treat it as a kind of added value because the vendors, first of all, they get more involved in the project. And secondly, it's like free log QA. Hey, so they also pinpoint errors to us, like something doesn't work or someone said something else in a different dialogue, etc. So we actually can forward this feedback and fix stuff before we go into further production steps. And to actually do that, we need tools and pipelines. So I already said that I will talk a little bit about day-to-day tools and supporting systems. So let's start with some info about how the narrative content is structured in our games. This will be a brief introduction. If you want to know more, I recommend watching Paweł Sasko's presentations or Kajtek Kasprowicz from the GDC because they do it more in depth. So our games are usually divided into quests, and those quests are divided into scenes. And each scene is divided into section, and each section contains one or several lines, right? So how does it look like actually in the quest editor? Boom. This is like a snippet of one of the dialogues. This is actually the dialogue that you saw at the very beginning with Johnny and V at the graveyard. It's not the whole thing, it's just like a snippet. So as you can see, the dialogues are pretty complicated and non-linear and depend on the player's choices and actions they did. And every of those red nodes on this structure is a section that contains a couple dialogue lines. And they're connected with each other, and when the signal goes through the dialogue, they're triggered. So we had to create a script format that reflects this structure and allows the translators and also the directors in the studio to follow the logical path of the dialogue. Because otherwise, sometimes the translations wouldn't fit, or for example, you would have big emotion jumps between the sections, which you don't want to have when recording VOs. So that's why we created our localization scripts, and we actually developed this idea already back in 2010. So we've been developing it ever since. And the important thing is that it contains a lot of extensive context. So metadata, which is exported from the screenplay editor. I still haven't fixed this. It's not script editor, it's screenplay editor. So such as like string ID, scene and section name, speaker and addressee, director's comments and scene comments, VO file names, and what's important, it contains hyperlinks which mirror the structure that you saw on the graph just now. And it allows the translators and the directors to jump between connected sections to ensure the proper flow of the dialogue. And let's have a quick look on how it looks like. So we have an example of a script here. Does it run already? No, I guess, yeah. So you can see all this metadata that I mentioned before. We start with the string ID here. We have the scene name and section name that contain also some context. The dialogue tier, speaker addressee, the director's comment, scene comment, and the actual line. At the end, the VO file name for the studio, both genders here in Cyberpunk, and here are the hyperlinks. So if you click a hyperlink, it goes to another section that's connected here. Here we have a choice hub. It jumps to the section that follows this particular option. So basically the translators have always the option to look into the script, see with the hyperlinks if the text matches, and also the same with the recordings. And you can also jump back. So this is pretty simple, but also very effective with such a complicated dialogue structure. And now I will talk a little bit about one of the supporting systems. So a system that allows us to produce a higher quality localization, and this is the dynamic lip sync. So the dynamic lip sync generates, we had different solutions since The Witcher 2. For Cyberpunk, we worked with the company called Jolly. So basically dynamic lip sync means that the lip and facial animation is generated dynamically for each language, depending on, based on the text of the line, the voiceover file that's being played, and also a language-specific lexicon, because every language has different phonemes pronounced in a different way. Example, Polish O and German O is already different mouth movement, right? So this allows for a bigger freedom when recording voiceovers, because the actors don't have to pay attention to the English lip movement. You don't have to adapt the text to match syllable by syllable the reference language. And yeah, it prevents discrepancies in visuals and audio, like in old Chinese movies dubbed into English, where you have mouth moving there, someone speaking there, and it doesn't really fit together. And this is a very short snippet from an example from the game. Judy, fan
Slow,
favorite.
deep breaths.
Doucement. Respire à fond.
Tief durchatmen.
Respira com calma.
慢慢深呼吸。
Oddychaj głęboko.
Dыши glубже.
Respiri lenti e profondi.
Respira lento y profundo.
So if you want to learn more, you can check on YouTube, Jolly, Cyberpunk 2077. There is a whole 30-minute video that explains how exactly it works. But yeah, that's just a quick rundown. So the next topic I would like to talk about is the markup language for Kiroshi and mother tongue characters. I've been talking about this language world building, which is super important for us, and this is what we did for Cyberpunk. So we wanted to implement this auto-translation technology in a way that's interesting visually for the player. So in Cyberpunk, people have implants that allow them to translate on the fly if someone speaks a different language. So what we did, we actually, so it helped creating this multilingual city and a melting pot vibe. So we decided that some of the characters will only speak in their ethnic languages. We identified several languages that we want to cover like that, and we went with it. So we had to make sure that this system is supported in the code, but also in the translation pipeline, the VO pipeline, and the lip sync pipeline. So the markup language that we created had to be read by the game itself. So the game needs to know, okay, I need to show this text, not this text, and the lip sync tool. For example, okay, I'm not generating lip sync based on the French lexicon, but Chinese here, right? So we also mark the characters in a specific way, so with an MT suffix. So that's a whole other presentation how we divided those characters, but we have a ganger here. So gang, voodoo boy, male, 03, Caribbean, 30 years old, mother tongue, which means that he only speaks Haitian Creole. And we all recorded those characters only once in the specific language, and it was used across all language versions. We stored them in a specific folder for common VO files, and the system knew that, okay, so these files should be used across all language versions. And we also taught our vendors how to use this system, so when we send them the translations, they can provide us with something that's already ready to use. And this is how it looked like in our script. You have an example of a short, several lines of Creole characters in English, German, and Japanese. So we have the actual Creole in the brackets, and then the translations. So the system knows that the lip sync needs to be generated from the Creole part, and then the translation is shown in the local language of the localized version. Fun fact, Creole has been generated with the French lexicon because it's actually based on the French. And this is how it looks like in the game.
Les pas sorti tant qu'on l'y toujours fait. Les pas fait aucun sens pour ces li cognard. She's done.
You actually sell meat out of here? Seriously?
Ou actuellement voulez acheter quelque?
Qu'est-ce ça l'a fait là?
La PC est intelligent, il semblait.
And in Chinese.
What job proceed?
Placide. Regardez ici, là.
Do, do, ti, pi, ti, mon.
C'est vous-même. Continuez. Placide. Regardez là.
So as you can see, the Creole character stayed the same in both versions. V changed because she's localized. And also, like for Chinese, it was another technical challenge to actually have two different fonts being loaded at the same time, right? So kudos to our UI programmers. So now let's talk a little bit about the localization tool. So we call them the kittens. I'm a dog person, but I don't mind. So this is our day-to-day tool that we use in our job. So it was actually created in 2017, so the time where we actually got our first log programmer, yay. And we've been developing it ever since. And as said, it's used by us to day-to-day tasks. Like we export log kits with it, we call them exports. We import translations back to the database. We create iteration comparisons. We perform logDB searches. We can quick edit the localization strings. We can implement, play, remove, replace voiceovers from the repository. We can create special VO exports like VO completion or single character exports. And much more actually, but yeah, I would need to have more time to actually talk about it. And this is how it looks like, super simple, but simple is actually good. So just like a quick rundown, we have several options here. We have a tab for doing exports here, different kinds, and then importing imports back to the database. A super important tool that we have is the comparison tool. So it lets us compare current iteration to the previous one. So you know that we can update the translations as we go and give it to the vendors. And then we have the tree here, which reflects the structure in the Perforce. So you can go, you know, quests, main quests, mark 1 or more to either export or to load them actually here in the tool. It works very fast. So if you, for example, click 2 scenes, they're immediately loaded, basically. And you have them in several languages. You can toggle the languages here on the list. So it's loaded also instantly. And we can perform logDB searches, like for keywords across the whole game as well. But here in the scene, so like, yeah. A keyword, you can open the string and actually see it in detail. So we have a history of each language version separately. So all the changes that have been made to a string, for example, in Polish, you can change them here and save if you wanna. And you can actually play some voiceovers if you have the depot connected.
So unless you got a better one, like I said, go yourself.
Okay, Johnny wasn't in the mood today. I beeped it out just in case, but like Pavel had like a lot of swearing in his presentation, so I don't know why they did it. So these are the rundown when it comes to the tools that we're using. And now I'll be talking a little bit about the approach to the tools and the technology and the pipelines that we're using, mostly on the basis of the voiceover pipeline. So the creators of those tools is the localization code team. So during the CP time, it was a part of the audio and localization team led by Colin, so who had just finished his talk. And it was a small team, just 2 people, and they developed the Kittens tool, and they were responsible for all things related to the dialogues. So they created the Kittens, the tool, the pipelines as well, the voiceover pipelines, so how voiceovers are handled, implemented, and run by the game. The materials for lip sync generation, so Jolly, as I mentioned before, so text files and VOs, and the relevant game engine code that actually allows to read the localization data. And at the end, the game packaging, so the actual final archives that are used in the game builds. And when they were working on the tools, they identified those pillars of good technology, and I can totally agree with them. So Tommy was calling it the pyramid of greatness. I will leave this name here. So yeah, this is the pyramid of greatness. So it contains several items here, and let's start with the bottom. So knowing the tech you're working with, knowing the people you're working with. And this increases the development speed. And then you have context, scaling, and automation, which actually increases the quality of localization. Context, because the content that's generated, that's created by our vendor is better. So it's all the metadata that I was actually talking about. And the scale and the scaling and automation, because it increases the iteration speed. So we actually spend less time on tedious tasks, you know, doing implementation checks, etc. So we can actually focus on the important things. Yeah, and the bottom. So the bottom pyramid is about the development speed. And the main point here is that the localization data is simple. So it's just strings and wave binary files, and you should use it for your advantage. So you don't need highly optimized code to handle those. Keep things simple. And this leads to better architecture, which is easier to expand, to faster implementation of the solutions, and then to faster back fixing, right? And the second part is to know the people. So it's good to know who's responsible for what, who's the key stake owner for a certain field, because if you actually have the relationship with the key people, you get requests of higher quality, they come in faster, and there are less surprises because you're more in sync and you know what's happening on the front. So let's talk a little bit about the quality. So the main source of quality in localization, I already mentioned that, and I will repeat myself till I die, is the metadata. So the context that we actually give to our vendors. So because of that, we get more accurate translations and better performance of the voice actors. And the scaling out and automation means that the system that actually handles the data can handle the number needed to that's required for a AAA game. So the content is also iterated faster, and we have more time to spend on the important things like rewrites and pickups, and we can fix bugs and iron out the small details in the end. And let's talk a little bit about the localization pipeline right now. So our task is to localize a AAA video game. So all the localized content is created in an editor, and in editors, different editors actually. And the localization tool Kittens handles the actual localization. Localized texts and the metadata is stored in the localization database. And the voiceovers themselves are stored in the Perforce. We have the localization manager, so this is the system on the engine side that actually allows to read the localization data and show it in the game. And then we have finally the build system that connects all those elements together. So when we talk about Cyberpunk, we had almost 100 people that were creating content to localize. Story writers, quest designers, cinematic designers, gameplay designers, UA designers, all those people. And when you count all lines in the game and all the number of texts in all the languages, we had around 3 million of items that were going through the pipeline. So that's why you need a high level of automation. So as said before, localization data is simple. So when you create a system, just generate all those strings that you expect to have and all those voiceovers, like WAV files, and just feed it to the system to see if it doesn't break. Because it's better to know it early in the stage of the production, not when it's actually needed and you're pressed on time. So what's the build system actually? The build system is these are C# executables on remote machines, and they move input from one of the components and pass the output to the other component. And the build system in our company is owned and developed by the DevOps team, and it's based on .NET technology. So we can use the build system to schedule runs for specific operations, or start them manually if we need them. And the important thing here is that you should actually have simple executables and divide them, because if something breaks or doesn't work the correct way, it's easier to identify where in the pipeline the problem lies, right? Because if you have like a lot of things together, if something breaks, you're basically all of the elements of the executable are offline then. And let's talk a little bit about the dialog pipeline right now. So you know the components now, and how do we get the data from the editors to the game. So when the designers save a scene in the editor, a log JSON file is created. So when it's submitted to the Perforce, it triggers a submit trigger. And the submit trigger in the build system starts a process that parses the JSON and then gets all the localization data into the localization database. And pro tip from Tommy, our localization programmer, is that those submit triggers work very well, and they were the backbone of our system automation, right? And basically, when we want to get the data back into the game or in the editor, we again use the build system, and it's both for the localization data and the audio data. And we have two different options here. So basically, we have the depot, which is a set of loose files that we can use in the editor or in the development builds, and then the archives, which are actually used in the final game builds. And yeah, now how do we handle the voiceovers? Everything starts with the kittens, again, so our localization tool. We create recording scripts that we send to the studios. We participate in recordings, we get awesome VO files back, and recording manifests with information on the files. And when you get the WAV files, a good thing is to, for example, write additional information in the header of the files, like when it was received, what kind of post-processing type is needed, or what's the actual hash of the dialog lines. So the VO files and the manifest are submitted to Perforce via kittens by us, and then the audio designers can actually download those VO files that need post-processing from the kittens as well, do the post-processing, and then put them into Perforce back. So yeah, when the files get into the Perforce, again, a build system trigger happens, and the files are actually getting normalized. So there are several steps that are done here. So we have 6 predefined levels of loudness of the files, from whisper to shout, that's being applied according to the manifest that we get from the studio. And then we add 300 milliseconds of pre and post silence, which is actually needed for our scene system and also for the lip sync system. And the files that don't require post-processing are also mastered, which means that there's no noise canceling made and some equalization. And then those WAV files are being converted into VEM files, which are being used by WISE, and then put into the game. But we also need files for lip sync, so 16-bit files that are used by Jolly, and then they're used for generating the lip sync animations. And a lesson that we learned with this is, like, it's cool to have everything, but don't store every intermediate step on your Perforce, because at some point we had like 4.2 terabytes of VOs in Perforce, and our IT was not happy about that, so we had to really clean it up. And basically this concludes the basics of our localization pipeline. And this screenshot actually shows a sunset because we'll be actually going away from some of the systems with the new engine that we're working on. But this doesn't mean that we're abandoning everything that was said here. It's actually the opposite, because we are taking all those tools and the functionalities and the pipelines that we had here into this new engine, but we also get some new toys to play with from our localization programmers, because they will be redoing the systems on better framework, better technology to actually handle the amount of data better and have better access for the game. So, at the end, I would like to share some success stories and shortcomings that we had during our production. So the first one was actually the cooperation that we had, so the LocTech team and the localization team. We are actually solving all the problems together in all the areas. We are planning and triaging and taking decisions together, even the difficult ones. And we did all of this with direct communication. So, like, of course, sometimes talk to my producer is needed, but like we really try to make it like face-to-face communication and talk about our needs really directly. And we always try to solve problems together. There were never like their problems. So we were usually sitting together, thinking about what is wrong, how can it be fixed, until we actually reach some conclusion. And the third thing is actually that was added by Tommy. I'm not that, narcissistic, so to say, but like, basically, we really try to be passionate about what we're doing. So we try to actually achieve this highest quality. We try to know our technology well, our topics, and we try to improve our tools and pipelines constantly. And that's why this direct and constant work with our LocTech was so important. The shortcoming that we had was pipeline transparency. So our system wasn't perfect, and the localization pipeline had constant visibility issues, where the users were not really sure at which stage their change is in. So there were often questions, where is my change? When it will be in the game? Is the line post-processed? And the root for this was the pipeline was spread over several build system components, and not all team members had access to them. So this was especially visible at the end of the project when the content was polished and all the fixes needed to be in the game as soon as possible for further reviewing. I already mentioned before, one of the pillars of the new system that we'll be developing for our future projects is actually to get rid of this problem. Yeah. And a second success story that we had was Korean voiceovers. So this was like a classic war story from game development, because it was 6 months before the release of the game that the board came to us and said, hey, let's ship the game with Korean voiceovers. So we really needed to act quickly. We had to do the whole cast and do the recordings. And then all the VOs had to be delivered, put through the pipeline, post-processed accordingly, and then tested. And we did it in 3 months. We did it in 3 months, and we consider it as a testament to the robustness of the pipeline that we were working with. But like, I don't recommend doing it that fast, really. And kudos to our Korean partner, because they were recording like with 4 booths, I think, at some point. That's not how it should be done, but we managed to do it. And the second shortcoming was we were talking about the automation, and you have to watch out, because sometimes our automated systems, pipeline systems, didn't cope well with numerous iterations. We had pickups over pickups. We were, delivering new files, and some of the files were stuck in the pipeline with post-processing, for example, and this in turn made old VO assets being played instead of the newest ones. So basically, we had to investigate the problem, and we had to do regular cleanups. We still actually have to do regular cleanups to clean the obsolete assets. So automation is good, but you have to really consider all the corner cases, because otherwise it can actually introduce more bugs that you have to find and fix somehow. So yeah, we had to request special tools for that from our LogTech team. And basically, yeah, that's it. So for the key takeaways I can give you for having high quality localization for a AAA game is to work with vendors specializing in one language, or if you can't, like, work with them directly. Basically, have contact with the team members. Don't know who's actually working on your game, because this gives you much more control over the process. So if you have any chance of people who can handle this kind of processes in your project, make them more involved and actually be part of the team also on the vendor side, because a dev always knows the game so much more, so much better than even the best vendor can. So if you can, just do it. And then also remember to work with the departments that create the content that you will be localizing. So creating this rapport, like this relationship with those people, actually helps figuring out how to do it in a way that the content that they're creating and they're so passionate about actually gets the proper treatment when being localized. And also, yeah, work with the tech team. So really talk about your needs, try to get the right tools and the right pipelines, and find solution to the problems that you're facing together. So cooperation is the key, as probably a lot of people in other talks also say as well. So yeah, thank you very much again for your, I don't have a closing, yeah, I do have a closing slide. So thank you once again for your time here. I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, if you have any questions to me right now, we still have a couple of minutes, or you can catch me after this here somewhere in the corridor. I will be around. Thank you.